Thank you so very much, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and welcome, Mr. Secretary. It's always a pleasure to see you. Mr. Secretary, days ago, the Venezuelan people faced impediments to a free and fair election due to the destructive and corrupt policies of Chavista loyalists. The CNE has stated that it will not allow a recount in Venezuela in an open and transparent manner. The U.S. must not, therefore, recognize these election results until a full and transparent recount and audit are conducted. Will you pledge here today that the United States will refuse to recognize the accreditation and swearing in of Nicolás Maduro? And I'll ask for your answer at the end. And does the lack of a coherent response from our State Department legitimize the Maduro regime? Mr. Secretary, here is a list of the voting irregularities cited by the opposition in Venezuela for your review. And as we know, Venezuela's largest supporter has been the Castro regime, as both continue to use oppressive tactics against their people. Yet by cutting U.S. democracy funds for Cuba, this administration is undermining the opposition and our efforts to help a true democratic reform on the island. Due to this proposed cut, civil society leaders may not be able to advance their democratic cause. And as our nation continues to face economic woes, the policy of the United States must be to be good stewards of U.S. taxpayer dollars. When I chaired this committee, I placed holds on the assistance to Palestinian Authority. Fayyad's resignation casts a greater shadow on the future makeup of the PA, and it opens the door for renewed reconciliation efforts between Fatah and Hamas. So if the PA is committed to the peace process, then why does the administration see the need to use U.S. taxpayer dollars to entice the PA to go back to the negotiation table? We cannot even guarantee that these funds will not end up being funneled to Hamas. And the administration is also requesting $580 million for a Middle East and North Africa fund. What specific benchmarks can ensure greater accountability and transparency in these funds, and who will oversee the implementation of this money? And Mr. Secretary, lastly, I have two questions for written reply to allow the Camp Liberty residents in Iraq to go back to Camp Ashraf. The double-layered T-walls that were protecting the camp were removed, and now the residents are vulnerable to armed attacks, as they were on February 9th when 8 residents were killed. Will the U.S. ask the Iraqi government to adequately protect the residents in Camp Liberty? And another question for written response highlights Greece's importance to the United States and asks for your help in urging Turkey to allow the Christian Church Seminary in Halki to reopen. So, Mr. Secretary, on Venezuela, will the U.S. recognize Maduro as the president in spite of no recounts?
Well, I can't give you a yes or no answer on that, because we've asked, we think there ought to be a recount. I don't know what is going to happen in the next days. They're talking about having an inauguration on Friday. Obviously, if there are huge irregularities, we're going to have serious questions about the viability of that government. But that evaluation has to be made, and I haven't made it yet. So I can assure you.
Will we be sending someone to the swearing-in ceremony in a U.S. delegation?
If it's under contested circumstances, I'd be very doubtful of that. But there's certainly no plan to. But I need to find out, we've got to take a look at what's going to flow here. Originally, Maduro also said there ought to be a recount.
And now the CNE has said
correct. And
no
now the CNE has stepped in and said no. I'm not sure that's over yet. The OAS has asked for a recount. Others have. So let's see where we come out on that.
Thank you.
Was the Camp Ashraf written for?
Just for written, but if you would care to.
Well, I'll just tell you very quickly. I met with Prime Minister Maliki a few days ago. This concern about what's happening there at Camp Liberty was very much on our minds in terms of security. We are working with them now in terms of trying to do interviews. We've actually run into some problems with that. There was an Albanian offer to take some people. That was turned down. So we're working through a complicated situation. We'll give you a full written answer on that. With respect to the Mideast, well, let me leave the Mideast, North Africa to last. On the Palestinian Authority, look, I have to tell you, there's no way any of that money is going to Hamas. There's no relationship right now between the PA and Hamas. In fact, there's still a pretty vigorous competition going on, and I don't anticipate a reconciliation in the next days or weeks, frankly. One of the things we need to do, Madam Chairwoman, is strengthen the PA. If you're, somebody here has got to tell me who's going to take the place of either Salam Fayyad, and now that's up for grabs, or Abu Mazen. And it seems to me that for Israel, for us, for the world, that not strengthening the PA is to work against our own interests. Admiral Boucher's there now is doing an extraordinary job following up on what General Dayton started a number of years ago to help build the security capacity in the West Bank. Last year, the entire year, not one Israeli was killed from an incident from the West Bank. So we need to recognize, even as there are difficulties, a lot is happening. Their economy is actually growing at a relatively decent rate. There's a level of cooperation which is growing and capacity that's growing. So we want to continue that, and I think that to not invest would be remarkably short-sighted, particularly given where we are now. Prime Minister Netanyahu has agreed in the last days to engage in a new initiative in terms of the economy, not as an alternative, not as a substitute, I want to emphasize this, to the political track, but in addition to, because he believes that you need to advance the
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time.
We'll go